Hi, Alexandra Knight here, Ohio PFR agronomist.
And I'm Tyler Schindal, the operator here in Ohio.
Today we're standing in front of one of our corn demonstration plots, and what we're looking at are different planting conditions. We know after these rains we've seen the last few days, people are going to be thinking about pushing those conditions to get back out in the field. So what implications are those going to have on your farm if you're pushing conditions? Tyler's going to tell us a little bit about what those conditions were like when he was out here planting.
So like Alexandra said, we have three different planting conditions. We have a wet, we have a marginal, and we have a good or ideal. This ground was worked on a Tuesday morning and then proceeded to get around a 1/4 inch of rain on it. We came in the next day on Wednesday and planted what we would call our wet pass. The wet pass was definitely wet. It was a little dry on top, but you didn't have to go far to find mud. The tractor pawed a little bit as we were pulling the planter through, indicating to me that it was a little wet. When you look at our seed spacing, it looked like maybe the farmers drug a little bit here and there. I'm going to say which would have been a possibility. For the most part, we closed our seed trench, but not everywhere. There's spaces where you could look right down and see the seed, and others that it didn't quite close maybe the way it should have. I think sidewall compaction is definitely going to play out on this throughout the season on this plot. When we go to the marginal, we planted that on Thursday. We had received a little bit of wind, a little bit of sun, a little bit of heat, so that kind of dried it out on top, but still it was definitely wet underneath. It planted a little bit better. Maybe in the observations we don't see that it drug seed anymore, but we're not going to rule that out. We waited then 2 days, and then on Saturday we decided to put in our ideal or good pass. It was really good planting conditions. The seed bed was about perfect. It closed everything. I would say a farmer would definitely continue on in that kind of condition.
So as Tyler mentioned, when we're out here looking at seed spacing, we see some clear differences. In our good or ideal conditions, we're seeing a pretty uniform spacing, pretty uniform stand really overall. Whenever we look at those wet or marginal conditions, we saw gaps of up to 10 inches between one plant and the next. As we look at this graph of 24-hour emergence, we're seeing on the left-hand side, we mark that 24-hour emergence in our darker soils with a little bit heavier organic matter. On the right-hand side, we're looking at a white clay soil that's on a little bit of a hilltop, which is going to be pretty characteristic of our Ohio soils. We see about a 5 to 7 day window from the start to end of our emergence in those wet and marginal conditions. When we look at our ideal soils, we're seeing everything start and end emerging in a matter of 2 days. We've noticed in some previous studies that with just a lapse of 24 hours in emergence, or a difference of 24 hours, between a 10 and 30 bushel difference in yield. If we're seeing a start to an end for 5 to 7 days, that can mean a huge yield drag. So by getting all these plants up and emerged in a matter of 2 days, we're really gaining on our yield and gaining on our overall return on investment. So as you're thinking about going out to the field, keep in mind that that planting pass is going to be your most important pass of the season. You don't want to push those conditions. We want to make sure we're getting the most bang for our buck and that we're really getting the seed in the best conditions possible. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the PFR Report, and stay tuned for further updates.